My name is Anna, 32 years old, living in a peaceful small town in Oregon. That day, soft sunlight streamed through the window, wrapping my room in a warm glow. I stood in front of the mirror, my hand gently resting on my belly. 7 months of pregnancy had rounded my figure, but today I felt strangely radiant. After months of worry, I was truly looking forward to a day filled with pure joy. My little house was filled with pink and yellow, balloons, ribbons, tablecloths with daisy prints. Everything was prepared by me and my younger sister, Brooke. Brooke is 4 years younger than me, full of energy, and always makes me laugh with her jokes. "If you weren't an expectant mom today, you'd definitely be crowned the beauty queen," Brooke said as she adjusted the bow in my hair, winking playfully. I laughed, feeling a wave of relief. "Stop flattering me, go check the dessert table before someone sneaks a treat before the party starts," I said, teasing but deeply grateful for her presence. Brooke pretended to be serious, nodded, and said, "Your Majesty has spoken, your loyal subject obeys." Then she dashed to the living room, leaving me alone in the sweet silence. I gazed around the room, the place where loved ones would soon gather to share in my joy. Every corner was carefully decorated. One had a gift table with small boxes tied with yellow ribbons. Another held the food table with pale pink cupcakes, milk bottle-shaped cookies, and a 3-tiered cake I had ordered a month in advance. The air felt cozy, and for the first time in weeks I let myself hope. Today would be filled with laughter. My mother Jane was the first to arrive. She carried a basket of food and busied herself setting it out, as if afraid there wouldn't be enough for everyone. She placed a hand on my shoulder, her eyes full of love. "Anna, you look like a painting," she said, hugging me tightly. I took a deep breath, taking in her familiar lavender scent that had comforted me since childhood. I softly replied, "I hope everything is as beautiful as this today, Mom." The guests started arriving in greater numbers. College friends, former co-workers, close neighbors, and cousins I hadn't seen in ages. Laughter and chatter filled the room, drowning out the soft background music I had chosen. I looked around, trying to take in every smiling face. My heart felt light. Worries melted away in that moment. Brooke came to my side and whispered, "Are you ready? Your in-laws just pulled up outside." Her words made my chest feel heavy for a moment. I nodded, keeping a smile on my face. "I'm fine," I said, though I wasn't sure if I truly was. I reminded myself, today is for the baby. Let our smiles shine. And I gently pressed my hand against my belly, silently promising my little one, "Sweetheart, I will protect you with all I have." I was adjusting a ribbon on the table when the doorbell rang, snapping me back to reality. Brooke looked at me, gave a small nod, and went to open the door. A chilly early spring breeze swept in, along with the figures I had hoped to avoid today. My mother-in-law, Deborah, and my father-in-law, Mark. Deborah, as always, stood straight, her face wearing the perfect, polite smile. But I knew behind that mask were eyes always searching for a flaw. Her gaze swept through the room, pausing at every decoration Brooke and I had spent the week preparing. Her lips curved, part smirk, part suppressed comment I didn't want to hear. "Anna, this house looks better than last time we visited. You really gave it your all, didn't you?" she said in a sweet tone with a hint of surprise, as if I couldn't have managed this without great effort. I took a deep breath and kept my smile. "Thank you. I just hope everyone feels comfortable today." Deborah stepped inside, walking slowly, as if each step was deliberate, her eyes fixed on the pale pink balloons and neat yellow ribbons. She stopped at the food table, tilting her head. "Oh, chocolate cake. You remember Mark isn't fond of chocolate, right?" she asked, glancing at me to gauge my reaction. "Yes, it's a small gathering today, so I chose a variety. I hope everyone finds something they like," I replied, keeping my tone light. Mark followed, his face wearing a smile outsiders might see as kind and friendly. He hugged me, his arm resting lightly on my back, but held a little too long. His eyes settled on my belly with a focus that made me uncomfortable. I stepped back slightly, trying to mask my unease with a faint smile. "Anna, you look well. Evan must be taking great care of you," Mark asked in his usual tone, though his eyes said something else. "Yes, I'm fine, thank you," I said, eager to end the awkward exchange. Deborah glanced around again, this time pausing at the guests, chatting by the gift table. Such a crowd. I hope you have the stamina for the whole party, Anna. Pregnant women can be so sensitive. She smiled softly, but her words felt like a dagger. I clenched my hands, keeping my expression calm. I'll be mindful. Thank you for your concern. My mother, standing at a distance, watched me with worry but didn't come closer. She knew I wanted to handle this myself, at least for now. Brooke glanced at me from the gift table, her face showing both concern and frustration. I shook my head slightly, signaling her not to make a scene. Mark found a seat in the corner, far from the center of the party. The water glass in his hand was nearly full, but even sitting quietly, I could feel his gaze flick toward me now and then, not caring but calculating. I turned away, seeking a friendly face in the crowd to anchor myself, to chase away the chill creeping into my heart. Deborah seized every chance to lean in and whisper to Evan. I saw him nod, his face briefly uneasy. When our eyes met, he turned away, as if battling with himself. The room no longer felt as lively. Laughter and chatter softened as if everyone sensed the tension creeping in. Conversations faltered, eyes occasionally darting between me, Deborah, and Mark, before quickly looking away. There I was, in the middle of a room adorned in pink and yellow, a space I had dreamed would hold sweet memories. Now feeling trapped in a play I never wanted to star in. The gentle background music played, and the laughter and chatter slowly returned as Brooke kicked off the first game of the party. My friends, former colleagues, and close relatives eagerly joined in, temporarily masking the tension that had crept in when Deborah and Mark arrived. I forced a smile, trying to blend into the joyful rhythm of the gathering, though my heart felt weighed down by a heavy stone. Brooke stepped into the center of the room, her voice bright. Everyone, write your guess for baby Micah's birth date and weight on a card. At the end of the party, we'll see who was closest. Laughter rang out, the soft scratch of pencils on paper mixed with playful teasing about the numbers, and the room brightened a little. But even in that cheerful moment, I could still feel Deborah's gaze fixed on me and my belly. She moved slowly through groups of guests, smiling politely, but as she passed me, she leaned in to whisper something to Evan. I kept my smile, but my heart ached. I had hoped today would be filled with joy, but now I knew what I feared was taking shape. Each gift was opened, drawing gasps and applause. A tiny pale blue sweater, soft leather shoes, children's books I had loved as a girl. Evan sat beside me, his hand resting lightly on my back, his smile more faded than usual. I knew he was trying to stay calm, but his mother's constant whispers left him feeling out of place in our own home. Deborah leaned in again, her voice low but loud enough for me and a few nearby to catch fragments. Don't be naive, son. Sometimes you need clarity now to avoid regret later. Evan swallowed hard, his eyes avoiding mine, and gave a silent nod. Mark sat across the room, quietly observing. He no longer pretended to chat with anyone, just watched me over his glass of water, now misted with condensation. His gaze, whether scrutinizing or something else, made my skin crawl. I turned away, focusing on the kind words of friends, on the next carefully wrapped gift. Sensing the mood, Brooke tried to lighten things with another game, guess the baby's name. Laughter rose again as people wrote down silly names just to make me smile. But I clearly saw Deborah move closer to Evan, this time whispering something that made his face go pale for an instant. My chest tightened. The unease, the vigilance I had tried to push aside was now undeniable. My mother lingered near the food table, her eyes always on me, catching every small change in my expression. Brooke no longer joked as before, her eyes asking silently, "Do you need me to do something?" But I shook my head ever so slightly, because I knew. If anything happened, I wanted to face it myself. To protect the happiness I had worked so hard to create. Deborah seemed to sense my awareness. She turned to me, offering a knowing smile, the kind that sent a chill down my spine. She didn't need to speak. Every glance, every whisper exchanged with Evan said it all. She was planting doubt, preparing for something I knew would not be kind. Evan could no longer keep his composure. I saw him glance at his mother again and again, then at me as if he wanted to say something but lacked the courage. The silence between us was more frightening than any words. The laughter and chatter of guests began to fade as everyone sensed the shift in the room. Jokes sounded forced, smiles became strained. I placed a hand on my belly, feeling my heartbeat quicken. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady as I thanked a guest for the gift I'd just unwrapped. But I knew. The storm I had sensed all along was rising, and it wouldn't stop at whispers or sidelong glances. The party I had hoped would be my happiest day was now just a fragile cover over the brewing storm, ready to sweep everything away. The music softened as if it too felt the thickening tension in the room. I had just finished opening a small gift when Deborah suddenly stood, raising her glass of water slightly as if about to make a formal speech. The room quieted, all eyes turning to her. I saw Brooke's fingers grip the edge of the table. My mother shook her head in warning, and I clasped my hands tightly, my heart pounding in my chest. Deborah smiled, but the smile no longer seemed polite. It was sharp, like a blade hidden behind sweetness. Her voice rang out, clear and deliberate. I want to begin by thanking everyone for coming to share in our family's joy today. It's truly touching to see so many people who care about Anna and the baby on the way. She paused, glancing round to ensure every eye was on her. But before we continue, I believe this is the right time to clear something up. To avoid misunderstandings, to protect our family and the grandson we're expecting, Evan and I have agreed to proceed with a DNA test. Just to be certain, so everyone can be at ease. Whispers spread through the room. Some guests looked shocked. Others exchanged bewildered glances. Brooke almost leapt from her seat, but I placed a hand on hers, stopping her. I lifted my chin, meeting Deborah's gaze without flinching. The room was so still, I could hear my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. Evan was beside me, his hand half reaching for mine before stopping midway. He didn't look at me. His eyes were on the floor, his voice strained. Yes, just so everyone feels reassured, Anna, it's no big deal. You understand, don't you? I turned to him, searching his eyes for a spark of reassurance, a denial, a word of support. But all I saw was a hollow nod, a gaze that darted away like a man fleeing his own conscience. The room felt frozen. Every eye was on me, the woman carrying the child they should have cherished, welcomed, and yet, here I was, made the center of suspicion in my own home, on what was meant to be my happiest day. I heard my mother draw a deep breath, her voice trembling but firm. Deborah, what do you mean by this? Why choose this moment right in the middle of her party to bring this up? Deborah turned to my mother, still wearing that smile as if what she said was perfectly reasonable. I'm sure you understand, Janet. A mother always wants to protect her son. Anna will understand too. This is just a step to ensure peace for everyone. No one's accusing anyone, we just want clear results. Her excuses only made the room feel colder. I looked around. The friends who had hugged me, brought me gifts, now stood silent, heads lowered. No one spoke. No one stepped forward, no one defended me. Evan remained beside me, his hand hanging by his side. His voice was so low only I could hear. I'm sorry, but I think it doesn't hurt to make things clear. My breath caught in my chest. I wanted to laugh, but my throat was so dry not a sound could escape. The deepest pain didn't come from Deborah's accusation. It came from the silent agreement of the man I had once trusted completely. Mark, who had been silent until now, slowly set his glass of water on the table and looked at me through thick lenses. His gaze no longer hid his confusion, or maybe something I hadn't yet named. But I no longer cared to find out. My heart had already shattered into pieces because of the very people who should have protected me. I stood up, quietly looking around the room. The place I had thought would hold my son's first sweet memories. Now, it was just a warped painting, where shame and disappointment mingled with the colors of balloons and cake. I remained rooted to the spot, all eyes fixed on me as if waiting for me to break down, to beg or to defend my innocence. But I didn't. I took a deep breath, my arms at my sides, my voice steadier than I imagined it could be. I know everyone is waiting for something, so perhaps I should just say it. The room was so quiet, I could hear the pounding of my own heart. Deborah smiled, a victorious smile, thinking I had accepted the power game she had set in motion. Evan looked at me, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. Brooke held her breath, and my mother stepped forward as if ready to shield me if needed. I opened my purse and took out a white envelope. My hand didn't tremble, it was just cold. "I've already done the DNA test," I said, my voice clear, each word cutting through the thick air. Deborah froze, the smile on her lips vanishing like a flame snuffed out by a cold wind. "What did you say?" she asked, her voice higher than usual. I looked directly at her, at Evan, and then around the room at every face. I had the DNA test done earlier. Not because I doubted myself, but because I was exhausted by the whispers, the accusing eyes I had to endure. Evan stepped back half a pace, his voice shaky. When did you do it?" I didn't answer right away. I looked straight at Mark, my father-in-law, who had been silent, his gaze averted since I pulled out the envelope. Then I spoke, each word slicing through the masks in the room. And that result wasn't to confirm with Evan, it was with Mark. The room felt sucked of all air. A terrible silence engulfed everyone. The whispers stopped, the murmurs vanished. Guests stared at each other in shock. Deborah's face drained of color, her mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came out. Evan stood frozen, his eyes wide as he looked at me and then at his father, as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. Mark blinked repeatedly, his hand gripping the chair so tightly it turned white. He stammered, "Anna, what are you saying? You think I held my head high, my gaze unwavering. "I don't think anything, Mark. I just wanted to end the suspicion and the violations I've endured in silence for so long. I'm tired of the late-night messages, of the looks from you that were never appropriate. That's why I did the test, to put an end to it all." Murmurs rose from the guests, the polite facade gone. Deborah turned fully to Mark, her eyes burning with fury. "What did you do?" she nearly screamed, her voice choked with rage and humiliation. Mark shook his head over and over, sweat breaking out on his forehead. I didn't do anything." I placed the envelope on the table in the middle of the room, my hand as steady as my voice. "The result is clear. There is no biological connection between Mark and this child. I never believed there was. But I did this to protect myself and my baby from the sick suspicions of the very family I had once hoped to belong to." Evan's hands trembled as he stepped forward and picked up the envelope. He opened it, his eyes scanning the lines of the report. Silence blanketed the room again. Then he whispered, his voice nearly breaking. "No connection, absolutely none." Deborah stepped back, her face red with a mix of shame and fury. She pointed at me but couldn't form the words. The strength in her voice had evaporated. Brooke stepped beside me, a silent declaration that I was not alone. Mark stared at the floor, unable to meet his wife's or anyone's gaze. He shot up from his seat and hurried to the door, leaving behind a room shaken by the truth just revealed. I watched him go, then looked around at the faces left behind. I didn't do this to humiliate anyone. I did this to protect the truth and to protect myself. The room, already quiet, now sank deeper into a dense silence, filled with stunned stares and heavy breaths. I had no more explanations to offer. I slid the test results toward Evan, my hand steady with the resolve I had fought so hard to summon. "This is the truth, Evan," I said, my eyes locked on the man who had once been my rock. "Not because I'm afraid of anything, but because I refuse to live in the shadow of suspicion, of whispers and accusing glances." Evan lowered his gaze, his hand trembling as he held the papers. His eyes scanned the words confirming, "No biological relationship between Mark Williams and the fetus." His face grew pale, as if each word cut through the illusions he had forced himself to believe. Mark had nearly reached the door, but Deborah stood frozen. She turned to her husband, her eyes blazing with humiliation and rage. You let it come to this?" Her voice cracked, trembling not with emotion but with the sting of being exposed in front of everyone. Mark stayed silent. He quietly opened the door, leaving it ajar, as if it too bore witness to the falsehoods he had clumsily hidden. Deborah hesitated a moment longer, then strode after him, her heels striking the wooden floor with heavy, shame-filled steps as she left the room. The murmurs of the guests rose, but no one dared speak aloud. I stood tall, feeling my shoulders free from the invisible weight that had pressed on them for months. I looked at Evan. He still held the paper, his eyes fixed on it as if willing the words to change into something easier to accept. "You let them do this to me?" My voice was soft, but loud enough for him to hear in the hushed room. Evan looked up, confusion and pain tangled in his eyes. I just wanted clarity. I didn't think it would go this far. I gave a faint smile, no more tears left to fall. Too far, Evan? It's gone so far that I had to protect our child, to protect myself, because you didn't have the courage to do it. Don't you see? I had to face suspicion in my own home, on what should have been the happiest day. Brooke stepped beside me, her warm hand on my shoulder reminding me I wasn't alone. My mother stayed behind me, her eyes gentle but filled with deep sorrow as if she shared my pain. Evan stepped back, his eyes following Deborah and Mark as they disappeared beyond the porch. I was wrong, he whispered, his voice breaking. I let my mother control what I should have protected. I stayed silent when you needed me most. I simply looked at him. I saw clearly now. This wasn't the strong husband I once trusted. He was just a man lost in the storm of control, leaving me to fight alone. Guests began to leave, one by one, offering awkward well wishes, their eyes filled with sympathy. The room grew empty, leaving only me, Evan, Brooke, and my mother. A soft breeze blew through the crack in the door, carrying the chill of a late spring afternoon, sweeping away the illusions I had clung to. Evan set the test papers on the table, his hands hanging limp, his eyes filled with regret. I'll make it right, Anna. I don't know how, but I promise. I won't let you fight alone, ever again. I took a deep breath, my heart still in pieces. Making it right doesn't start with promises, Evan. It starts with action. With you setting boundaries, protecting your real family. No more silence. Evan nodded, tears streaming down his face, and he didn't bother to wipe them away. I understand now. I really do. I turned toward the window, looking out at the yard where Deborah and Mark had disappeared. The pale pink balloons still floated against the gray sky, a reminder that this party, though broken, had marked a truth that needed to come out long ago. After that day, our home felt strangely quiet. The ribbons still hung on the window frame, the deflated balloons drifted to the floor like silent witnesses to what should have been a day filled with laughter, but I didn't care anymore. I spent the following days finding myself again, seeing more clearly than ever the path I had to walk. Evan didn't hide anymore. The morning after the party, he quietly cleaned up the remnants of that day. As he placed the hardened cake tray into the trash, he looked up at me, his eyes pleading for a chance. Anna, I'm sorry. I didn't protect you. I didn't protect our baby. I can't deny it anymore. I need to make this right, really make it right, not just with words. No words came immediately. In his eyes I no longer saw the defensiveness, the excuses I had seen too many times. I saw deep regret, a true desire to start over. If you really want to start over, Evan, let's begin by facing the truth. That very afternoon, Evan reached out to a counselor on his own. I went with him to the first session. I didn't say much, just listened as he opened up about feeling torn between his mother and me, about the fear of hurting one or the other, about the cowardice that had driven him away from me. I sat beside him, my hands on my belly, feeling a bit lighter as he finally admitted it, not to me, but to himself. Week after week, we kept going to therapy. I saw Evan change, little by little. He began to say no to his mother. He canceled the weekly dinners Deborah called family tradition. He turned off his phone when she called late at night, something he had never dared to do. He started putting our small family first, over the expectations Deborah had imposed on him since he was a boy. Deborah and Mark quietly vanished from our lives. No texts, no calls. Mark stayed completely silent. Deborah sent one package to our house, no card, no explanation. Inside was a small silver necklace engraved with Micah's name. I carefully repackaged it and placed it in the deepest drawer. Not out of hatred, but because I knew one day Micah would have the right to decide what that memory meant. I began to find my voice again. In every therapy session I said the things I had swallowed for so long. I spoke of the pain of being doubted, the loneliness of standing in a crowded room where no one truly stood with me. And with each word it felt like chains lifting from my mind. I allowed myself to smile more. I called my mother every morning just to hear her voice, to remind myself that unconditional love still existed. I worked with Brooke to plan Micah's room, repainting the walls, hanging small pictures that spoke of hope, not sorrow. Evan became a true partner. He was no longer caught between two sides. He was my husband, the father of my child. He spoke less, but every action proved his promise. One afternoon, seeing me sorting through old papers, he came over and gently said, "Anna, you don't have to carry it all anymore. I'll be the one to block the wind, so you don't have to stand alone." I looked at him, and at last I saw a glimmer of light at the end of a road I'd thought was only darkness. There is still a long journey ahead. I know there will be days Evan struggles with old habits, with his mother's hold. I know there will be moments I feel unsteady again. But I also know I've reclaimed my voice, my trust in myself, and the strength of a mother determined to protect her child with everything she has. The final weeks of my pregnancy passed in a peace I thought I'd never find again. Our little home became a true sanctuary, no longer a battlefield of control and submission. Each morning I stood by the window, feeling the sun filter through the trees, my hand on my belly, feeling Micah's small kicks. Our child who helped me see the truth and the strength I never knew I had. Evan stayed by my side on this journey of healing. He didn't promise grand things, but I saw what I needed in his quiet acts. Preparing the nursery, standing up to the pressure of his mother's dinner invitations. For the first time, I saw the man who had once been weak, before Deborah, now standing up for his own family. Micah was born on a gentle summer morning. His cry filled the hospital room and washed away my fears. When the nurse placed him in my arms, his tiny eyes opened and met mine for the first time, and I knew every storm I had weathered was worth it. He had Evan's brown eyes, and a firm little mouth that Brooke said would surely inherit my strength. I don't know what his future will hold, but in that moment I vowed to protect him with all I have. Deborah didn't come to the hospital. She only sent a short note through Evan, saying she hoped everything was well, without a word about what had happened. Mark remained silent. I wasn't angry. I no longer waited for apologies. What needed to be revealed had been revealed. What needed to leave my life had left. What I cherish now is only the family in my arms. Brooke came to the hospital soon after I gave birth. She brought a small bouquet and her warm smile. She hugged me, looked at Micah, and whispered, "You did it, Anna. Not just bringing him into the world, but holding on to yourself." Her words brought tears to my eyes, but this time they were tears of release, of trust in myself. In the days that followed, I watched Micah sleep, listened to his steady little breaths, and reflected on all I had been through. I once thought silence kept peace in a family. Now I know. Silence in the face of control and doubt only feeds the darkness. The truth is never something to fear. The greatest fear is refusing to face it, letting it make us small before those who shout louder. I don't share my story to expose anyone or to gloat over someone's downfall. I share it, the story of a wife, a mother once doubted, overlooked, standing alone in a room full of people. To remind women in similar situations, you are not alone. Your voice deserves to be heard. Your truth deserves respect. And no one, nothing, has the right to make you bow your head to baseless suspicion. Micah will grow up, and one day he'll ask what happened. I'll tell him, not adding, not leaving out, not covering up. I'll tell him that in the moment people questioned his existence, I stood and spoke the truth, so he could be born into a family built on courage, not reluctant silence. There may be hard days ahead, but I'm not afraid anymore, because I know I've weathered the biggest storm of my life with my head held high. And I hope every woman, every mother facing control and doubt, finds the strength to speak out. Because when you dare to tell the truth, you hold the key to the life you deserve. What do you think of Anna's story and her journey to protect her child and herself? Share your thoughts or your own story in the comments. Don't forget to follow the channel for more meaningful stories about family and life.